Hello there, I'm Randy Spretvet, and we're watching Why Girls Love Sailors. Now, this film, they began shooting it January 31st, 1927. They worked on it essentially 2 weeks through Tuesday, February 15th, and then they shot some more from the 16th through the 19th. And then almost a month later, Hal Yates did some retakes on March 18th and 19th. You know, the Hal Roach comedies were always previewed, and if audiences indicated that a certain sequence wasn't funny, they'd rewrite it and shoot a whole new scene, and I'm quite sure they did that with the ending of this film. Now, the idea of Laurel and Hardy appearing in a nautically themed adventure had been proposed earlier in August of 1926, when a script called S-14 was written. It would have co-starred Anna Mae Wong and Sojin Kamiyama, and it had a lot of elements of action and adventure, and it would have really been the first teaming of Laurel and Hardy at the Hal Roach Studio. By the way, you can read that script in my book, The Laurel and Hardy Movie Scripts. You can also read the script for Why Girls Love Sailors in the Laurel and Hardy Movie Scripts Volume 2, and that's enough commercial. The script offers this summary of the story, which is very different from the film. The story concerns a little girl who was picked up in a storm at sea by an old fisherman. Now, speaking of the old fisherman, look at the bottom right. You will see him in just a moment for just a few seconds. There he is, Charlie Althoff. Now, that is a pal of Stan's, and he was a vaudeville buddy. Stan said in 1962, he wrote some letters to Richard Sloane and Chuck McCann, and he said, Althoff was a very nice person. He can hand you a lot of laughs. Charlie appeared in one silent film with me. He was playing at the old Pantages Theater here in vaudeville. He had a week's layoff before opening in Salt Lake City, so I was able to fill in a few days for him at the Roach Studio. Charlie did a great vaudeville act, a very funny rube character. He was known as a showstopper. The film he worked on was a fishing village story and a family of fishermen. His character was named Grandpa Smelt, and I was his wayward grandson Willie. All the family smelt, and so did the film, to high heavens, unquote. Well, actually, the old man in the script is called Sam Salt, and he's the guardian of Viola Richard, who you see there. Stan, or Willie Brisling, is just her boyfriend. He's not related to the old man. And the script in this part of the story has a very, very lengthy and involved scene involving a piano and the fiddler's bow and some kittens and some fish. Well, you can read that in the script, Laurel and Hardy Movie Scripts Volume 2. As I mentioned, Stan's name is Willie Brisling in the film, bristling being a small fish similar to a sardine. And we're seeing Viola Richard, Evelyn Viola Richard, born in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on January 26, 1904. She had done a tiny role in a 1926 film called Exclusive Rights, a crime drama produced by B.P. Schulberg. And this film, Why Girls Love Sailors, was her next credit. It was her first of 13 shorts for Hal Roach, 7 of which featured Laurel and Hardy. She's also unforgettable in a Charlie Chase film called Limousine Love, as a lady without clothing who hides in the vehicle hired by Mr. Chase on his wedding day. And her next film after that Chase short was Laurel and Hardy's short, Should Married Men Go Home? And that was her last prominent role. She evidently left films because she got married in August of 1928 to the Fox Theater executive Alexander Kempner. Now, she did dabble a bit in acting. She was in a dramatic short in 1929 called The Lineup. That's her only speaking part in movies, and you can see that on YouTube. The Lineup from 1929. It's a dramatic two-reeler. In October and November 1934, she was in a Broadway production called Geraniums at My Window, which lasted for 27 performances. And she also did some extra work at the Roach lot in 1935. She's in Tit for Tat and Our Gang's Sprucin' Up. It's interesting here that Stan has a tattoo. And you'll see in a moment he kind of does the crying routine also. This stomach gag where Stan has an extended stomach because of all this water. There's the crying routine. Stan has a distended stomach because of all the water. That would be expanded in the 1930 short Blotto. Anyway, Viola divorced Mr. Kempner in 1938, and she married a man named Sidney Rusinow, who managed a cosmetics company that Viola had started, and they were together from 1942 until he passed away in 1951. On Christmas Eve of 1953, Viola married philosophy professor Lawrence McCafferty, who survived her. She died in Riverside, California on December 28, 1973, just about a month shy of 70. And I want to thank my friend and fellow son of the desert, Brad Farrell, for information about Viola. Now, Stan, of course, has to come to the rescue of Viola. And I think they're shooting day for night here. I'm not sure. They did actually shoot. That looks like day for night to me there, because you can still see some. It still looks like the sun is out. They've just probably stopped it down to make it look as much like night as they can. By the way, behind the camera was a man named George Floyd Jackman, born in Tama, Iowa on March 27, 1885. He had been a student at dental college in 1910, but by 1918 he had followed the lead of his older brother Fred to similarly become a cameraman at the Mack Sennett lot. And working at the Warner Brothers studio in the early 20s, he transitioned to the Roach lot in 1924, and he photographed 4 Western features starring Rex, the King of Wild Horses, in addition to several short comedies with Charlie Chase and Mabel Normand and others. And after he filmed Laurel and Hardy's You're Darn Tootin' in January of 1928, at the age of 42, he put away his camera permanently, and by 1929, Floyd Jackman had his own dental practice, and he had an office for years at 6777 Hollywood Boulevard. He was the dentist to the stars, and he passed away at 77 North Hollywood on November 27, 1962. Oh, there is Jerry Mandy. Okay, Jerry Mandy was born as Gerald Mandia, or Gerard Mandia, I should say, in Utica, New York, on June 5th, 1892. He'd been doing supporting roles in 2 reel comedies for Joe Rock and for the Stern Brothers before coming to the Hal Roach Studios in 1924. And for the next 3 years, he worked at the Roach lot almost exclusively. He appeared a lot in the All-Star series, like this one, and also with Charlie Chase. Now, his most prominent role during this period, aside from this one, may well be the soldier in With Love and Hisses who eats garlic to the dismay of his fellow train passengers. And just after he appeared in this film, Jerry Mandy had a featured role in the Joseph von Sternberg drama, the dramatic feature Underworld. So he was quite versatile. He could do dramatic parts as well as the comedy ones. Stan is headless, and maybe Jerry is supposed to be playing a cabin boy. Maybe he's had a snifter or two, and that's why he's actually so frightened of Stan, just with that hat pulled over his face. You're going to see Jerry clinging to Hardy just like that, and this is the way that Stan does in Do Detectives Think, which we'll see a few films from now. Poor, you know, that's the disadvantage of being a big guy like Babe. People automatically think that they can jump onto you, and then you'll be able to hold them. By the way, Babe is still awfully defiant to someone who is supposed to be his superior, as you'll see here in a moment. He doesn't really have any name in the film, but in the script, Babe's character was Bill Haddock, first mate of the good ship Breadpoultice. And the captain, played by Malcolm Waite, was supposed to be Captain Typhoon, the gentleman who preferred blondes. Well, that will come into play later on. Now, Malcolm Waite, who is the captain there, he had worked as a foil to comedians before. He's with Harry Langdon in Feet of Mud in 1924, and his best remembered role is Jack Cameron, the bad guy in The Gold Rush, Charlie Chaplin's feature of 1925. He was born on May 7, 1892, in Menominee, Michigan, and he amassed several important roles during the silent era, notably in the Eddie Cantor feature Kid Boots in 1926, and in the 1928 epic Noah's Ark. And from the advent of the talkies from 1942, he did a lot of unbilled bit parts. He died 56 in Van Nuys, California on April 25, 1949. He was known as the Millionaire Extra because he evidently had some connection somehow to high society. How, I don't know. Now, before long, you're going to see a trunk, a theatrical trunk, which will have a lot to do with the rest of the story here. There it is, Jules Ellinge Theater. Now, that's clearly meant to suggest Julian Eltinge, who was a renowned female impersonator in vaudeville for many years. In fact, he even had a theater named after her. Now, in the script, this women's clothing was not left behind by a theatrical company. It was left behind by one of the captain's girlfriends named 8 Belle Bertha. And the captain, who prefers blondes, remember, he throws 8 Belle Bertha off the ship when he discovers that her blonde hair is only a wig. Well, gentlemen prefer blondes, and evidently Malcolm Waite is someone who follows that philosophy. The captain has evil designs on Viola, which will soon be somewhat abated by that receipt spindle. That's what that's called, a receipt spindle. And now, once again, Stan is in feminine attire, as he was in Duck Soup, and as we will see once again in Sugar Daddies. And as I mentioned, Stan was in a vaudeville sketch from 1918 through 1921 called No Mother to Guide Her, and every day he dressed up in women's clothing and did probably 3 or 4 shows a day doing that sketch. Now, this sailor, that's Edgar Deering, born May 4th, 1893 in Ceres, California. This is his 7th known film, the first one being Harold Lloyd's 1925 feature, Hot Water, maybe 1924. He may or may not have been a motorcycle cop in real life before joining the movies. He was a truck driver according to the 1920 census, and after that, 1930 and onward, he's a movie actor. He's listed specifically as a motorcycle cop in at least 51 of his 357 known film credits. Now, obviously, he played other parts because he's playing a rough sailor here. He was also in a lot of westerns, but he's some kind of lawman, either a sheriff or a judge or a policeman or a motorcycle cop in 163 of his films. And he died in 1974, August 17th of that year, at 81 in Woodland Hills, California, which tells me that it was probably at the Motion Picture Country Home. The script is very different in these scenes. The script does not propose this elaborate scene of Willie flirting with each of the crew members, knocking them out with a bludgeon, and then leaving them for First Mate Hardy to throw overboard. And by the way, thumbing the nose like that was a gesture of disrespect. It's often used by Charlie Chaplin in his earlier films. Now, there's a very similar idea to this, hitting somebody on the head and then taking them somewhere else once they're unconscious. That's in the 1934 Laurel and Hardy short The Live Ghost. And a similar gag was worked into the team's last film, Atoll K, in 1951, this time with heroine Susie Dallaire enticing and clobbering the villains. You saw some animation effects there. That may have been done by Roy Seawright. Roy Seawright was originally Hal Roach's office boy in 1919 at the age of 14. Now, Roy Seawright's father was the architect overseeing the construction of the Roach studio on Washington Boulevard in Culver City. And one day he was up on a scaffold and wind came up and he was thrown off and killed. And Hal Roach, of course, felt terrible about this, so he promised young Roy a job at the studio as long as he wanted it. So Roy Seawright went from being Hal Roach's office boy at 14 to being a prop man to being a cartoonist and animator. And he ultimately became the head of the optical effects unit and did some very respectable work for films like Topper and those Swiss Miss, all the later Laurel and Hardy features. Stan's doing a raspberry there, which is another gesture of disrespect. That will show up in the Laurel and Hardy feature Pardon Us, where it gets Ollie into trouble with the tough convict Walter Law. Now, you're going to see Laurel and Hardy's longest scene together here in the film. And up, Stan's caught. Well, Stan is doing his come hither look, and you're going to see in this scene once again how well Laurel and Hardy work together. You're also going to see Ollie looking into the camera a lot all through this film, and indeed, I wonder if there are any films, from his earliest films onward, where he doesn't look into the camera. He learned very quickly that could be a very effective way of communicating with the audience. Because even long before Laurel and Hardy, he was using the technique of communicating his feelings to the audience by looking directly at us. The earliest one I can tell you about is a 1916 short called A Warm Reception, which he appeared in when he was 24, but there are probably examples of it that go back to 1914, his first year in movies. Oh, Viola is still tussling with Malcolm Waite. I haven't kissed a woman since we left Africa. Yeah, well, yeah. You're still not going to kiss a woman since you left Africa. Yeah, we have to have some cutaways to Viola every once in a while so that we know that she has not yet been taken advantage of by evil Malcolm Waite. Hardy is such a good and expressive actor. You know, he really carries the comedy load in so many films and most of the Laurel and Hardy pictures. Now you see, Malcolm Waite sees that it's a blonde instead of brunette Viola Richard. And since he is the captain who is the gentleman who preferred blondes as per the script, well, see, he's keeping Viola in abeyance so that he can chat up with the golden-haired hussy. Now there is Anita Garvin. Oh, we love Anita Garvin. Anita Frances Garvin, whose bravura performance here as the captain's angry wife, that was one of the most welcome surprises of this film's rediscovery. This film was lost for many years, and thanks to Peter Mickelson and Dwayne Smith and other collectors who preferred to be nameless, we've had this film since about the late 1980s, but never in such beautiful shape as in this print, this copy. Anita was born in New York on February 11, 1906, and by the age of 13, she was a Ziegfeld showgirl because she was 5'6", which was pretty tall for a girl in those days, and she could pass for 16, which is what she told the producers that was her age. She began her film career in 1924 with Al Christie and ultimately appeared in 95 films. Now, of course, Babe thought that the shapely leg belonged to the blonde that he was chatting with a moment earlier. He found out different. Now, the ending was different. I'm going to read it to you from the script. Cut to the captain, who smiles and exits towards Stan and speaks title. It isn't the first time I fought over a woman. The captain puts his arm around Stan's shoulder and pulls Stan toward him in a rough hug. Stan takes it and tries to pull away. The captain has Stan in such a position that when Stan pulls away, it opens the dress from the neck down to the waist. The captain draws Stan toward him with the idea of kissing him when his eyes fall on the tattooed boat on Stan's chest. Very slowly, the captain brings his eyes up from the tattoo and looks at Stan. Stan looks at the captain and then at his tattooed ship, and immediately the ship sinks in a cartoon shot. The captain realizes who Stan is, makes a grab for him, and in doing so, Stan's wig comes off. We play an ad-lib chase in which the girl is involved. Cut to shot of the wheel with no one in attendance, spinning around back and forth, so the ship is aimlessly drifting. Stan runs to part of the deck, followed by the captain. This setup is with a lot of boxes, packing cases, barrels, etc. As we get to this point, the ship strikes something which causes the boxes and barrels to fall on the captain. The girl, that's Viola, rushes to Stan and says, "We've struck a rock." Stan embraces her and looks around and says, "To the lifeboat." Business of packing lifeboat with barrel of water, corned beef, hardtack, etc. Stan helps the girl up into the boat and then climbs up. He starts to lower the boat, and in doing so, he releases the wrong rope and the boat disappears fast out of sight. Cut to interior of the houseboat. That's the boat that was at the very beginning of the film. The lifeboat comes right through the ceiling and goes through the floor and into the water. The girl says, "Home at last," then asks Stan where the old man is. Stan gets up from a sitting position while under the water and says, "Here he is." The old man comes from underneath Stan and spits out a mouthful of water. Fade out. This would have been very expensive to film, so that's why they got rid of it. Now, Anita has a blunderbuss there, which she's going to use to lethal effect in a moment. And you see here in this rewrite, Stan pulls the wig off intentionally. It's not something that just happens accidentally during the captain's tussling with him. Of course, Anita's wearing a blonde wig too, but we're not supposed to know that. Now, where's Viola all this time? Oh, she's still in that closet, isn't she? Oh, Stan's gonna go get her. There. Ta-da. Just a moment. Where's Babe all this time? I guess we don't see him again. Well, we'll see him in the next film. And yes, the script did establish the fact that the captain indeed was quite a womanizer. So that's been brought back into the film. And there's the blunderbuss. Okay. Anita evidently knows how to handle a firearm. And Viola and Stan make a quick getaway. Oh, my goodness. Uh-oh, Anita's still on the warpath. Watch out. And with a whirlwind finish, we bid farewell to Why Girls Love Sailors. I'm Randy Scretvet, and thank you so much for listening.